This is a monetary policy that's coming through by the look of things if he gets into power,
Right.
of saying, look, we're going to move away. We have to embrace being number one in manufacturing crypto in this country. And if they can, of course, the US dollar's been number one as far as currency is concerned globally, with the petrodollar. If they can now move into the crypto space, in that there's a bit of a hustle to get into number one position for there. Now, some interesting developments have come up since that. And Kennedy was talking about this, of having reserves. The government, US government, wants reserves on Bitcoin, right? They want to have 1 million in his policy. Kennedy's saying, I want 1 million Congress now, the Treasury Department, to have 1 million Bitcoin in reserves. That's 5% of the market, right?
Right.
Which means that America then reserves that and saying, hey, we as a government recognizing that there is value in this asset class and want a piece of the pie.
Before we start, we need to tell you up front we are not a licensed financial planning, accounting or law firm. This is simply an education program which will give you factual information. We do not give any general or specific advice around finance, business, investing, options trading or anything else. That is not what this presentation does. Please see a licensed financial planner when it comes to any investment advice you need.
It's Edge Radio Australia, time for the Growing Wealth. We're up here on the socials. We're out there in the world. It's all on edgeradioaustralia.com. And of course, if you have our lovely little Android app, you can be listening away. Or you could go into your computer thingy, right? You know, that box that has information on it. It's also called a tablet, also called a phone. And you can actually interact. Get on that, whether it be Facebook, whether it be YouTube, wherever it happened to be, you can be part of the conversation. The conversation we're going to have, though, is with this man in front of me. It's Derek Whittaker.
Here I am. It's nice to be with you, man.
Mate, great. Let's get into today's show. I don't want to, as much as I love the pleasantries, okay, we have so much to talk about today. How are we going to fit it all in? I'm really not even sure.
Let's start with something fun. If you ever get the opportunity to go to a big, massive conference in the United States, go. I went to the 2007 Dove Awards, and I was there for a week. And it was incredible. I mean, the Americans know how to put on a show.
Oh, they do.
And that was no exception. Okay. And it's with the media pass as well, you had access to everybody.
Nice.
It was sweet. And I didn't have to pay for it either. The station
It just gets better all the time. Come on.
So if you ever get that opportunity, go. And looking at some conferences, there was a huge one on the weekend.
Okay, what was this?
Bitcoin 2024.
Right.
They met where I actually went, Nashville, Tennessee. And they've met all over the country. This thing has, I think, started in 2019 and is getting bigger and bigger. And you can understand with the industry of cryptocurrency why that's happening. They are drawing some huge names at this conference.
It has changed, right? Like crypto used to be in the outer. It certainly isn't anymore. We're talking about, you know, the massive players in the financial world of every description who they understand that the toothpaste is out of the tube. Right, it is time to embrace and, you know, use this as this wonderful opportunity that's there.
Well, have a look at what's happening in the crypto space, right? And I'll talk about what's happened at the conference. Some big things have happened, but look what's happened recently in that space, and that was that BlackRock has basically launched the ETF for Bitcoin.
Yes,
which is ETF is an exchange traded fund, which basically means that big money can get access to the underlying assets by buying shares in a particular company. And so what they do is they hold the underlying Bitcoin there. So it fluctuates on the price of Bitcoin. So it's an easier way for many to get access to that asset class as opposed to going out and buy the Bitcoin themselves and then having to go to a crypto exchange and then move that to a cold wallet and have a 20 seed phrase. And you know, when you're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars that these hedge funds manage,
sure.
Yeah, it's easier to get exposure to that for a lot of firms that way.
I'm trying to buy Bitcoin with actual coins. I mean, come on, like, it's a whole different scale.
It is.
It really is. But I mean, obviously on the political front, we're seeing a lot more adoption of it. We're seeing, you know, it being a massive part of campaigns in the US being recognized. So look,
I've changed my tune on it too.
Yeah, you have actually.
I have. I've changed my tune, and the whole reason why is because I have to look at it from an investment perspective.
Of course you do.
And I have to look at risk. And for me, there were other products that I could hedge off on the volatility of the stock market and potentially profit better than what crypto could offer me. Like an 80% downturn on Bitcoin is dangerous, right?
Hey, say that again. Sorry.
Which part?
80%.
80% downturn on Bitcoin is
Right.
dangerous,
Okay.
right? So if the
Yes.
price goes down and drops,
Sure.
that's dangerous.
Of course it
But
is.
with a lot of stuff I teach about stock options and
Mhm.
stuff like that, that's actually opportunity. You can make money on the thing going down, right?
Agreed.
And I can't do that kind of hedging in this space. The other issue for me was, in the back of my mind, is what a government intervention going to be like when it comes to this kind of asset class. We've seen in China lots of banning going on in
Yep.
relation to the asset. And I was like, are they going to do this in the Western world as well, where the government goes, this is not government issued currency,
Mhm.
therefore we're not going to accept it and we're going to ban it. We see it as illegal tender. And that, I'm going, how many thousands do you want to risk on that play?
Sure.
So it's always been on the speculative framework for me
Totally agree.
in
And
doing that.
understand why. Yeah.
What's changed for me is when, on a personal level, the banks froze my bank accounts last year.
I wonder why that affected you personally. I can't understand why that would change your mind.
Yeah.
Well, how? Oh,
And then they give me a hard time about, you're late on paying your debt and that sort of stuff. It's like, well,
Yeah.
there's a reason for that, yeah?
yeah. Excuse me. Oh.
You want to blame me on that one? And it's kind of like, well, I realize you've got to get out of that system to some extent
Yeah.
and have something outside.
And that, to me, is the big attraction, right? Is getting that free. I'm all about freedom, as we very much know. And I see so much restriction, so much control, so much government control when it comes to, and obviously, well, the entire fiat system is so controlled, right from the very top, all the way, Reserve Bank, all that sort of thing. So to me, I see this as a way of being able to enjoy commerce with other people, right? Okay. With some freedom, with some control with actual self-control, right? Not somebody else, standing over the way I spend my money as an overlord.
The reason I don't think they got rid of it too is the technology is far more efficient to, of course, the SWIFT banking system that they've had since the 70s.
Yeah.
In allowing a lot of intermediaries to charge big fees to just move your money around to pay someone.
Oh, Derek, I'm happy to wait 12 days for a check to clear.
Or even an international wire. It takes forever.
Yeah.
And I've had clients lose a lot of money trying to do it that way because the IBAN didn't talk to the SWIFT number over here in Australia or whatever, and it's just a nightmare. So the technology is allowing people on the blockchain to do this far more efficiently. And I think that's why they've kind of gone, let's watch this space.
Okay.
In terms of taxation, the governments have gone, here's a good opportunity to raise some capital we weren't getting before. Let's tax it. I think that possibly could be changing, at least in the United States, when it's come out of the Bitcoin 2024.
Okay.
Some of the big names, of course, were Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He did a big speech on that. He was very interesting in the way he approached this. He was talking about what he would do if he was president, and whether he'll get in or not is debatable. But one of the big things that he highlighted was how the IRS taxed Bitcoin holders in 2014 without the approval of Congress or the president.
Really?
So we're seeing that he's saying, and he basically just came out and said they've suppressed the prices for these reasons. They want to control it and they want a piece of the pie.
Okay.
This attitude too, in terms of how it's taxed, is really interesting, allowing people autonomy in terms of privacy.
Yep.
Right. He's saying, we'll back that. People should have that. Secondly, he was saying that the taxation issue of moving it from one coin currency to another, so going, let's say, from Bitcoin to a stable coin or something like that, or Ethereum, that triggers taxation. It does here in Australia.
Okay.
It's treated differently in the United States, but they're arguing, hey, people shouldn't be penalized for holding this as a currency. So it's really interesting that this talk is now in the mainstream and that notable people who are running for office are doing that. And of course, the big one who came to the conference was DJT. This is how big this conference is getting now in the United States.
Yep.
And it's really interesting how they are changing tune on it. Okay. Let's have a look at, if we could, of his approach to it back in 2019. It kind of reflects a lot of the people's journey.
One last question. You don't like Bitcoin? You wouldn't invest in Bitcoin? Do you invest in the stock market at this moment?
So not at this moment. I think it's high. So I have not invested in the stock market at this moment. I have in the past, but I have not at this moment. I think it's high. Okay. Bitcoin, it just seems like a scam. I was surprised. With us, it was at 6,000 and much lower. I don't like it because it's another currency competing against the dollar. Essentially, it's a currency competing against the dollar. I want the dollar to be the currency of the world. That's what I've always said.
That was interviewed back in 2019.
I was about to say that hasn't aged well, not at all. But he has certainly changed his tune on that one.
And I think it's because of what's happening with, of course, the running up of debt in the United States, with the amount of printing that's gone on since 2020.
Well, it's a different world, mate. Completely different world. Okay, the money with the post cough, right? All that money that was printed has no basis on anything. I mean, we got rid of the gold standard 50 years ago. This is just paper that's creating inflation, right? So, yeah, isn't it time? That conversation is 5 years ago. The world was a completely different place. And the fact that he's changed his tune on that, and he's certainly not the only one, as he said, JFK Jr.
Robert F.
Robert,
Kennedy.
sorry, wrong Kennedy, got the wrong one. It's just the autopilot, you go straight to JFK. But yeah, we're talking about very prominent people here, all right, who are on a platform to become president of the United States, the leader of the free world. If they're talking about it in positive terms, you've got to be aware.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. admitted he'd bought a lot of Bitcoin as well.
Is that right?
Part of his portfolio some years ago. And he said, he had the reservations about it and all this sort of stuff. And I think there's been the lack of understanding, but also the wondering of acceptance on these things. I find it also interesting that since that time, since 2019, we've seen the emergence of the BRICS nations as well.
I was going to make mention of that, absolutely.
And the weaponization of the US dollar in, of course, that conflict in Europe. That has kind of highlighted for them, they're going, hey, we want to be able to do exchanges here outside of using the US dollar as a reserve. And so that move against that the Americans have had to respond to that and go, well, where do we go from here? Now, we saw the former president, comment at the Libertarian Society some weeks ago.
That was a good speech.
And commenting on the fact that for Bitcoin holders and crypto holders, we're going to allow them to do this and we're going to take the restrictions off.
And I will also stop Joe Biden's crusade to crush crypto. We're going to stop it. I will ensure that the future of crypto and the future of Bitcoin will be made in the USA, not driven overseas. I will support the right to self-custody. To the nation's 50 million crypto holders, I say this with your vote. I will keep Elizabeth Warren and her goons away from your Bitcoin. And I will never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency.
This is a monetary policy that's coming through by the look of things if he gets into power, of saying, look, we're going to move away. We have to embrace being number one in manufacturing crypto in this country. And if they can, of course, the US dollar has been number one as far as currency is concerned globally, with the petrodollar. If they can now move into the crypto space, in that there's a bit of a hustle to get into number one position for there. Now, some interesting developments have come up since that. And Kennedy was talking about this, of having reserves. The US government wants reserves on Bitcoin. Right? They want to have 1 million in his policy. Kennedy's saying, I want 1 million Treasury Department, to have 1 million Bitcoin in reserves. That's 5% of the market, right?
Right.
Which means that America then reserves that and saying, hey, we as a government recognizing that there is value in this asset class and want a piece of the pie.
Well, on that, this is the ongoing argument, okay? Is it an asset or is it currency? I mean, in my mind, look, to my mind, it's a currency, right? So, the capital gains on it, I'm not sure how you should be taxed on that. Is it like when you're purchasing, foreign currency? Is it that sort of setup?
Well, that's been the whole argument, right? And look, in fairness too, I mean, when you go to the shop and you use currency, you're not taxed on that, okay?
Sure.
But you are taxed if you are a foreign exchange trader.
True.
In terms of the gains that you're pairing different currencies against each other.
Yep.
So there's some argument there in terms of, hey, when is this an asset? Is this currency, etc.? And that's been the whole debate.
But an asset, right, can be bartered with as well, right? So you could remember the old barter card, but you can barter your goods and services for something else as well. So okay, then does that product become currency? Does that asset become currency? It's such a grey area.
Well, yeah, and that's why they hate, taxation officers hate bartering, because they can't tax it. It's so clunky to do. How do you, charge GST on, hey, we're just going to do a deal. I'll help you here and you help me there.
Yep.
How do you tax that?
Look, exactly that. Look, capital gains is a big issue for so many people here. And this, again, comes down to my argument. Is it a currency or obviously it's the same argument everybody's had. But Can you see it long term being treated like purchasing foreign currency? Is that in the taxation way?
With
that works?
all the talk of central bank digital currencies, how
Yep.
can they tax that, right? You would expect them to. Again, the value is not so much the coin itself, but also the blockchain behind it. And I
Yep.
think that's what they've looked at.
Okay.
I want to raise this point too, is that you remember in the United States, they've had this argy-bargy going through the courts there between Ripple or XRP
Mhm.
and the SEC, which is
Yes.
a securities. It's like our equivalent of ASIC
Yep.
in the United States, all right?
Mhm.
And they have been fighting. And of course, Ripple got some ground there in
Mhm.
terms of winning part of their case and getting verified. And this is holding up a lot of the whole Ripple experience in the United States and its value as a coin.
The ripple effect.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, and it's funny you should say that, because Ripple is all about liquidity. That's the value they're trying
Okay.
to bring. They're trying
Okay.
to replace Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is slower in its technology. It's
Yep.
a bit clunkier in terms it takes a few minutes for it to move through.
Okay.
Ripple does it in seconds.
Right.
So in the cross-border payments, when you're doing billions and billions of dollars, you need something probably a little more efficient
Speed. Yeah.
and probably also a little more stable. And so
Okay.
that's what it's coming in as a solution. And so they've had a big fight. Were they issuing it as an asset class or was it currency? And they've gained some ground in that. It's the only crypto coin that's actually had some legal backing on it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There is the argument that it's not central, it's centralized as opposed to being decentralized. Bitcoin is decentralized, which simply means that it is computer programmed in terms of accessing it, as opposed to there's no human involvement in manipulating its price per se, in terms of, hey, we can reissue more coins and print more money, so to speak.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's been the
absolutely.
big deal for a lot of the crypto space.
The fact that it is not something that can keep growing. You can't just print it. That retains its value, and that gives it its growth in a lot of cases.
But there's interesting things coming out on the SEC, which I'd like to have a look at now, in relation to where, if he's elected, where he stands as far as the SEC is concerned. Have a listen to this.
Okay.
On day one, I will fire Gary Gensler and appoint a new SEC chairman. I didn't know he was that unpopular. Well, I didn't know he was that unpopular. Let me say it again. On day one, I will fire Gary Gensler. Whoa. And we'll appoint a new SEC chairman who believes America should build the future, not block the future, which is what they're doing. And Kamala Harris wants to make him Treasury Secretary. That's not good. That's not good. He was Hillary Clinton's finance person. Did you know that? Crooked Hillary. Remember Crooked Hillary? Do you remember her? Anybody remember? He was the finance chairman of Hillary Clinton's campaign against the gentleman known as Donald Trump. Not a popular person within the... Actually, she came to my wedding. Do you know that? To our great First Lady, Melania. Came to our wedding.
There you go. You're getting some clarity. It's amazing what will get you a standing ovation.
It is amazing. It tells you just what an effect it's had, on everybody there, really. Because, okay, their room is full of entrepreneurs. Okay, these are people who are looking at, and these are the people who are pushing America forward, right? If they feel that strongly about it, it tells you a lot. These are not the sheep of society. These are the people who are moving the country into
America needs that innovation again.
They do.
And I think that he's basically saying over the last 3 years, you have not had that, and we're going to take that off, and those restrictions. And I think that's really interesting in terms of if you're Gary Gensler, at the moment.
You're not feeling popular, okay? There's
right.
lack of love right there.
And people making themselves very, very clear as to where they stand. And given that as well, he gave a different insurance too on the whole CBDC stuff. He's said this before at the Libertarian Society.
That speech.
Let's have a look at what he said this weekend on that whole issue, which people wanted to hear about. This one gets a little bit of a different kind of response.
Okay.
They ordered the Treasury Department and other federal agencies to cease and desist all steps necessary because, there's a thing going on in your industry. They want to move the creation of a central bank digital currency. It's over. Forget it. CBDC. There will never be a CBDC while I'm president of the United States.
To me, that could win a lot of votes in relation to what is it, because that's been a huge concern of so many crypto holders, that they would try to be controlled, that their rights of freedom and privacy would be taken away from them if a CBDC was in place.
On that front, side note, but it's worthy of a mention, is the fact that I was alerted to this recently. One of the recent updates on electric cars, actually in the terms and conditions, come up, everybody just goes, yeah, okay. It's like, who reads the Apple conditions, right? So everybody does that. Well, a man did. He actually read them, went through them, and he found that actually they were now asking permission, effectively, if you press okay. So for you to keep using your electric car, for you to still keep the maps and all of that in there, and the infotainment and all the goodies, to do that, you actually have to be open to geofencing. Right, so they can actually turn your car off, on and off. Right, you are now allowing that inside your car. So you are if they say they don't want you 10 k's out of Perth, for argument's sake, out of your city, whatever, they can actually do that. That is coming through the tech. Now, why do I mention that in this particular case? Obviously, when we're talking about a digital financial system, we're talking about a social credit score. Okay,
Yep.
The two are just completely linked. So if you want government to have the ability to go, you know what, hey Aaron, you're not allowed to go that side of the river this week. You've used up all your credit, or things that you put on social media, we don't agree with them. You can't go that way. It is now. This is
it's like a dog on a leash.
It's absolutely, or an elephant with a very small chain, right? And you learn to live to that chain. It is very distressing to me to think that, we're living in this world. This should be science fiction, right? But it's fact. And when it's in the terms and conditions, it's actually there. The tech is there. They can do it. This push into electric cars is a very, very, very good controlling measure. And that's why so many countries are just saying, forget about it.
Yeah. And I think that's very much in terms of the philosophy of looking at how he's running his campaign, is give freedom back to the people.
As it should be.
And I think, to some extent, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has also been echoing that as well, and wanting that and having huge concerns. And you listen to what a lot of he says, Kennedy, and it makes sense. It's actually well thought out.
Oh, look, Kennedy's a fantastic candidate, right? But he won't win. He's going to chance the world. And the Democrats have certainly pushed him aside. He should be the nominee for the Democratic Party.
I think he will have influence. I think he'll have some space there. I'm sure that there'll be room made to facilitate him, because he is actually very well researched in what he's saying, and that comes out in anything he says. In terms of the approach to, of course, how this Bitcoin will be used, there is a thing, and what goes to the next segment we've got here, where Senator Cynthia Lummis brought out and read the Bitcoin Reserve Bill. And what they're proposing and wanting to do. And this is really fascinating in terms of changing the perspective on this cryptocurrency.
Here it is. This is the Bitcoin Reserve Bill. I'm reading from the text. In the Senate of the United States, to establish a Bitcoin strategic reserve, a network of secure storage vaults, purchase program, and other programs to ensure the transparent management of Bitcoin holdings of the federal government. My name is Cynthia Lummis, and I'm the Bitcoin Senator. when Satoshi Nakamoto, in January of 2009, mined the first Bitcoin, he brought about an asset that will change the world. And this is our Louisiana Purchase moment. This Bitcoin reserve that we're going to create will start with the 210,000 Bitcoin that President Trump just mentioned and pull it into a reserve stored in geographically diverse vaults. And that's only the beginning. Over 5 years, the United States will assemble 1 million Bitcoin, 5% of the world's supply. And it will be held for a minimum of 20 years and can be used for one purpose: reduce our debt.
So there you go.
Yes, indeed.
Very, very interesting perspective how governments are now responding to this cryptocurrency. Now, let me put this in perspective for you. According to CoinWeb, this is interesting. The United States government holds 69,640 Bitcoin.
Really?
And a lot of that came from FBI legal seizures. Okay.
Okay.
Remember Silk Road?
Yes, I do.
That's where they got 56% of the Bitcoin.
No way.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, the US government certainly know where to go shopping.
What's interesting is El Salvador bought a lot of Bitcoin back in 2021.
Right.
And they began accepting that as legal tender. They hold 2,473 Bitcoin in its wallet. And of course, the price to get into that kind of exposure to Bitcoin was a lot higher than, of course, when the FBI sees those
Very
those
different
amounts.
times.
In terms of retail users, 2 out of 3 Bitcoin owners, 66% come from emerging countries.
Right.
A lot of them have
Okay.
seen that as a means to curb inflation. And this was even before the last 3 or 4 years in the 2020s. A lot of nations were going, my currency is facing so much inflationary devaluing. I have got to lock it into some sort of asset, so I hold on to something. And that's where you saw a lot of retail people in third world countries getting into it. And Norway has 2.1% in MicroStrategy through the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund. And this is really, really interesting. So indirectly, it owns about 3,390 Bitcoin. That's really interesting in terms of governments looking at possessing a digital asset. And it kind of puts in perspective as to, well, where do we go from here?
All right, where do we go, Derek?
Well, that is a great question. I think that there's going to be far more clarity in terms of taxation coming out of this, as far as nations are concerned.
Right.
When that places, of course, we've got the mainstream adoption. We've got more ETFs coming on from other big hedge funds. I think we'll get one for Ethereum very soon. And I think they'll probably do that for probably maybe a handful of coins, right? I don't think they could do the whole thousands that are out there. I don't think
that's possible or practical, quite frankly.
I think a lot of those are meme coins. While people can make money of those at this point, potentially, I think a lot of them will long-term disappear. Because they just won't meet the requirement standards of reporting. Because what we're seeing is that mainstream adoption is going to, of course, come in more legislation as to what's allowable and not.
Well, that's kind of the annoying thing about it, though, because you're just increasing regulation.
What's interesting, though, Aaron, is the whole thing of centralization and decentralization. And it will be interesting to see how that's going to emerge in this space, where and how that plays out as far as that space is concerned.